Right. I feel like she's wearing my Red Badger t-shirt.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. Oh. Cool. Alrighty then. All right. So, yeah, of course. You're my guest. Yeah, so I guess good shout. Bit of housekeeping. The toilet is there. If anyone needs it. If you're busting, then don't worry about interrupting any talks. Just go to the toilet. And there's also a toilet above that one as well. Is the door open? The door's locked. So it's just that one. Cool. So welcome everyone to Red Badger. Who's been to Red Badger before? Sweet, a few people. That's nice. So on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So yeah, we have some events here in the office, events that we can fit in the office. We had a big event yesterday as well, organised by the lovely Amy at Cargo nightclub, which is like very swish. But this is a more intimate affair. And after we finish, the sniggering from the front row when I said intimate. Like when we finish, there's all that drink needs to be finished off. So like everybody is welcome to stay and chat, and we'll put some music on, maybe dance. Also, I should definitely say Red Badger is hiring as well. So if you know anyone, okay, that's my little bit of a marketing plug. We're actually hiring across the board of disciplines. So if you do know anyone, or if you're interested, take a look on our website, and we've got the roles on our website. Do I need to be speaking more into this?
Oh, you can just hold it, yeah.
Like this. Like, never gonna give you up. Okay, so without further ado, Amy, was that okay for an intro? Okay, so without further ado, we're here to talk about accessibility. I'm going to talk a little bit about the not very technical side. So I'm a designer, and so therefore, when it comes to talking about semantic markup, I'm not the best person to be talking about that, but I will talk to you about design and user experience design. Following me, we have our lovely design director, Sari, who will talk about visual design. Okay, and then Dom will follow to talk about the technical side of stuff over there. So we like to think that that's kind of reflecting the actual process, perhaps, of actually building stuff. So everything begins with the user, the customer, and we think about that. We do a lot of work and a lot of research, and then that kind of follows through into design, the visual design, and we might do some testing. And then finally, you end up actually building the stuff, okay? So that's the agenda. And I think this is going to last about 20 minutes. And I've been able to spread the intro out for 5 minutes, which means I only have to worry about the next 15, which is awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about historic accessibility to start with. Oh yeah, I also meant to say right now, the political correctness about talking about disability is something that I'm not very good at. I don't actually know what the current appropriate terms are for people with various impairments. Okay, so I will apologize in advance if I offend anybody. I mean it. I'm not going to sort of like dance around terms and pretend that we're trying to be very politically correct. I'm just going to state things as they are. So that is why I'm going to say who is disabled. Then we're going to talk about some technology and how it helps. And then maybe I will cover a little bit of approach at the end. So historic accessibility, we'll start with a quiz. I'd like everybody to be involved, if possible. Love a bit of audience participation. So this chap here with the beard. Does anybody want to hazard a guess as to who he is? Anyone? Oh, hang on, my dad makes it into this presentation and I've sent him the YouTube link, so he might be watching. Outrageous. So nobody wants to guess who this is? Gutenberg, who said that? Well done, lady at the back. So this is Johann Gutenberg. Okay, extra prize if you can tell me what century it is. 15th? 16th? Sorry, who said 15th? The guy at the back. Okay, so Johann Gutenberg is well known for coming up with the printing press. Okay, so the first, well, he's heralded with coming up with the printing press and the first movable type. Movable type, if you don't know, for those that, just very quickly, movable type, you have letters. These days they're metal, and you put them on a rack and you spell words and then you print words, right? It's how newspapers were made. But actually, it's not the first. It's not the first movable type. Movable type does actually date back to Chinese, back in very, very early, like around 300 AD, something like that. I'm trying not to check my notes too much. I can't actually see that fact. 2020 AD. So this is Johann Gutenberg, one of our first actual kind of, I guess, consumable media that everybody's used to using, right? Newspaper. Next in the quiz. Ooh. Does anybody want to hazard a guess as to what that is? It's a coloured squiggly line.
Something to do with colour blindness.
No, I like that. Good guess. So it's a Google Doodle. All right, so it's a Google Doodle to celebrate a guy called Heinrich Rudolf Hertz' 155th birthday. All right, so in the 19th century, early 19th century, actually, I don't think it was early 19th century. In the 19th century, this guy Hertz, he proved that you could send radio waves from one location to another. Right? If you actually Google, and I did, and I read too much about who to credit with the invention of radio, it's very difficult. But this guy, Hertz, did prove that you could send radio waves from one location to another. So this is my next step in the media, in the consumable world of media, of radio. Honestly, if you don't guess this next one. Okay, sorry, this is a bit raggedy. I should have copyright stuff on this as well. This is on YouTube. So who's this guy? Does anybody know who this guy is? Does anyone want to guess roughly what year it's in? Does anyone want to guess what this is about, this picture? Right, this is about TV. Okay, so this is a guy called John Logie Baird, which is an amazing name. And this was him broadcasting animated pictures in 1925 in Selfridges, actually. So back in the early 20th century. So this is my next piece of like media, consumable media that we're all used to every single day. Newspapers, radio, TV. Does anyone know who this guy is? Hey, who said Tim? Fucking Tim, yeah. So there wasn't actually any really old school pictures on the web for Tim, because he is actually live, and he's Sir Tim, by the way. And so obviously, like late 20th century, he invented the interweb, intertubes. So we've got four key parts of media. You've got like newspapers, you've got radio, you've got TV, and you've got the internet. But the problem with these three, does anyone want to have a hazard a guess as to what the problem with these three are? Right, they're all one way. Right, yes, you can write to a newspaper, you can like send a text to a radio broadcaster, or you can write into television, but they're all one-way forms of communication you have to consume. We're talking about accessibility, right? Talking about web accessibility, probably. Most people here thinking we're talking about web accessibility. Now with the internet is the first medium that we have ever had as a human race that we can design from the outset to be two-way and actually enhance the lives of people with disabilities. It is the first time ever. Newspapers were rubbish for people who are blind, and radio is rubbish if you're deaf, and TV is suboptimal if you are either blind or deaf. So yeah, if you're deaf, you can have 888. Who's heard of 888? Who's heard of subtitles? But if you're blind, did you also know on TV you can get kind of audio description, right? You can turn audio description on, and it's bizarre, right? Watch TV with audio description turned on. You see a scene happening, and then you see an audio description. And she walked through the wall. She walked through the room, and she went to the kitchen, and she put the kettle on. And you have an audio description. Suboptimal experience. But the internet is the first time we can actually design experiences that are optimized for people with various different impairments. But we're not used to it because we're used to television and newspapers and radio. So we just think we don't care. It doesn't matter. Oh, we're going to do a nice website. But we can actually make a much better experience for people with these impairments. And it's the first time. And it's our responsibility to do that. So this guy, Ethan Marcotte, he wrote, author of Responsive Web Design. He wrote a load of other stuff as well. Well-respected designer. He talks about flexibility doesn't require sacrifice in the quality of the experience. And the reason why I put this up there is because a lot of designers, a lot of UX people, a lot of visual designers and UX will kind of be like, oh, really? Do I have to really think about that? Do I have to think about like accessibility? Well, actually, it doesn't require sacrifice to do that extra piece of work. Okay, it doesn't. And we'll go on to why that is the case. So I want to ask a question. Since you're so engaged and everybody's like putting their hands up, I want everyone to put their hands up now, please. Everyone to put their hands up, please. Thank you very much. Keep them up. Thank you. Now, I want to ask you, first of all, put your hands down. Put your hands down if you have personally, your own body experienced disability. Keep your hands up if you haven't. Right.
If you haven't, keep your hands up.
Yeah. Okay, now the next question. So look around. I want everyone to look around. If everybody had kept their hands up when they should have done, you'll notice not many people put their hands down. Okay, personally. What about who has a disabled relative? If you've got a disabled relative, put your hands down. All right, look around. People with their hands up, can you put your hands right up so everybody can see, please? Thank you. So you've got 7 of you, 8 of you. But let's pose a different question. Let's say Who here, everybody put their hands up. Everyone put their hands up, please. Who here has ever been disabled? Now, what I mean is, have you ever broken your wrist, your arm, your leg? Have you ever been physically impaired? Have you been 9 months pregnant and you haven't been able to run down a set of stairs? Have you ever been disabled? Put your hands down if you've ever been disabled. Now look around. Look around. We've got one person. We've got one person. Okay, final question. Who has ever had a disabled relative at any point in their lives? Put your hands down if you have. Look around. Everybody, right? Everyone has had experience of disability. Everybody. Right? There's no point in me saying, oh yeah, you know, this percentage of that percentage, blah, blah, blah. As a UX designer, if you do that, you're not going to count them, right? Because you're going to create your personas. And then, oh no, this is just like 10%. That doesn't work. That's not worth it in a persona. But you need to be thinking about these things all the time, okay? We've all had experience of it. And just to kind of like tell you my stories of personal, my experience with disability, many years ago now, a very close member of my family had a very terrible accident. And she was diagnosed with being in a permanent vegetative state. That's what they said. And she was in intensive care in Austria, and we flew her back to intensive care in Plymouth. And then when she came out of the coma, we flew her back to Torbay Hospital, which is where I grew up. And we decided to take her home against doctor's orders because she was like this in bed. Honest. So where spastic comes from, right? Mm-hmm. She was like that. We decided to take her home on a Sunday where the whole family was. And she was trying to communicate stuff. And it was pretty bleak, right? And I was like, I know. I've got a fucking computer keyboard. And so I got this computer keyboard and it was this. Wasn't this actual one? And I put it in front of her and she started on the keyboard. So technology helped her communicate. She couldn't use a mouse, but she could use a keyboard. We need to be thinking about these use cases when we're designing stuff, right? It changed her life, actually. So another example, does anyone know what this is? I'm running out of time. Does anyone know what this is? Yeah, it's like a hearing aid. It's actually a hearing aid for a cochlear implant. So like you have a cochlear implant and you hook this over your thing and it's a kind of new hearing aid. So you see a lot of deaf people with them these days. My dad's deaf. And so I thought I'd ask him about, you know, this talk that I'm doing. So I'm like, oh, it'd be really good to get some like real life, you know, UXer. It's all about research and speaking to real users and stuff. And he was like, I said, you know, have you had any bad experiences online with being deaf and like using the web? And he just mentioned that like captions are rubbish and unreliable on video and stuff like that. So I guess if you're deaf, maybe that is the worst of the worries, maybe. But then he went on to tell me about a service issue, and as UXers as well, you worry about service design and the big picture. And he had a problem trying to make a complaint or trying to get through to somebody with to a company. And he phoned the company up, and he was like, "Okay, I'm deaf, right? So it's hard. He's deaf, but he can hear with a hearing aid, but it's very difficult for him to hear on the phone. So he was saying, I'm deaf. I need you to answer in email." And they said, right, okay, no, I need you to respond in email. And so they said, oh, okay, great. Sorry, Mr. Dollar. And they sent him an email and they said, we're very sorry about all the trouble you've been having. You know, we apologize. We understand that you're deaf. You'll be receiving a phone call from us next week. So it's not just like online as well, it's the whole service design piece as well. And bringing it right back to me. So who knows about this, right? Apple say 44 pixels is the ideal finger size, right? Well, I'm not joking, but this thumb is not 44 pixels. Okay, this thumb is more like 80 pixels and it does not work. And it's because like I smashed my thumb when I was young and stupid. So if you compare these thumbs, so that's wrong as well. This is Apple. This is like design, like gurus. Everyone thinks Apple is the best, right? but they're wrong with this. They're wrong. So you need to be thinking about these things all the time. Don't just take it as read. Think about who your users are. Okay, so I'm running out of time. So in closing, before I pass on to the lovely Sari, who's going to talk about visual design and some really practical tips of how we can make things more accessible. If I didn't actually give you some practical tips, then you'd feel shortchanged. So, some practical tips. Responsive web design works. Why does it work? If you're designing stuff to be accessible, why does it work? Because when you're doing responsive web design, you need to think about mobile first. And you need to think about what content is the most important content on a mobile. That works on a desktop for accessibility. What's the most important content, right? This is not rocket science. Focus on information architecture. So think about like your wayfinding, think about how you label things. I've kind of done a couple in one blast there. Think about like how you label buttons. Try to avoid the old like next thing. But we do that anyway as UXers, right? We should be doing that. We shouldn't be just going next. It should be like save and go to payment or something like that. Maybe that wouldn't fit, but you get my gist. Think about information architecture, information hierarchy. Where should the content sit? Don't require point and click to change tab order. Obviously, that's a really big one. Make sure that you can just tab through it. And ensure specific action to activate a select box. So don't have a select box which is like a navigation element. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Because if somebody makes a mistake and they're using like a screen reader or they've got something like strapped to their head that is helping them make these decisions, they're going to have to click back, go back to select box. So don't enter, make sure you have specific actions on drop downs. And don't have automatic moving content because you don't know if the people that are looking at your website are cognitively impaired. It might take them much longer to read the content. Okay, you put a carousel on your homepage and it's like, carousel, woo, we're great. We're great, woo. So another word, like somebody who's cognitively impaired, they need more time to read it. So forget the moving stuff, right? Forget it. Use media that's universally readable, sorry. So you think about captions for videos, audio descriptions, describe the content of the images. Strong visual cue for keyboard focus. So we all know that like browsers have that anyway, but it's really worth it in the UX phase with your designer when you're working together collaboratively that you discuss how you want these focuses to be displayed. And actually, bad preparation because that is the same as that. Universally readable media. So just one more quick thing before I wrap up, because I've gone over time. So I thought this sums it up really. Money barriers to cognitive accessibility are the same as usability problems for the general audience, but more severe. So this follows the theme in design generally, which I think Sari's going to pick up in a minute. You do good user experience design, it's going to be good and accessible. Who knows what this is? Well, it's the most annoying thing in the world. You can actually read this because I took this straight off the website. But it is the most annoying thing in the world. Can you imagine having to do this if you've got like a pointer on your head and you can't move your body and you're trying to do this with a keyboard? Can you imagine? Or can you imagine if you're like deaf or blind? I mean, I'm not any of those things, fortunately, but I still find these a pain in the ass. But they're actually like a word for it. It's called completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. CAPTCHA. Or, as Jard Smith says, completely annoying patience test to confuse the hell out of your audience. All right, so that's kind of it, really. At the end, I did thought it might be interesting because we know when you do testing, sometimes you might not want to go and find somebody who's got these impairments, but you might find it's a bit awkward. But that's fine. How could you do it yourself? Why don't you try doing this? Like when you're testing stuff, use your left hand if you're right-handed. If you're right-handed, use your left hand, or vice versa. You could try wearing gloves, right? You can try putting a blindfold on, but use gauze or something like that so you can partially see. And there's loads of stuff online that you can like simulate glaucomas and that kind of thing. Try earplugs. Or try just relying on the eye beacons. We've got an eye beacon installed here, haven't we? I think. She switched off. Anyway, so we'll share this stuff, but a lot of the content from that actually I did get from this amazing book, which I definitely recommend. So we'll share that all out. But yeah, so that's me. Does anyone have any questions at this point, or are we going to go straight into Sari, or what's the deal? Well, does anyone have any questions, I guess? Okay, I guess we'll go straight into Sari. So we'll welcome Sari Griffiths, Design Director at Red Badger.
Thank you.
I'll grab your water.
Oh. Thank you. And screen. Right. Something wrong. I'm just about to send everybody to epileptic seizure or something.
Politically correct job.
Sorry. No, it was like really flickery. Really, it's still not working. Oh no. It was working earlier. Come on. No signal. Did I fly it?
You can email it to me.
Oh, is it coming? Okay.
Screen.
Is it? Yes, Hangout is on. Yeah, it should be on. Yeah. Yeah. All right, and phone.
Screen sharing.
Huh? I did, didn't I?
Yep.
I thought I did. Oh. Come on. Yeah. Is it right? This is there. Give me water, thank you. So, hang on. Right. Okay. Right. Are you all right, Alex?
Say something.
Hello? Yeah, is it there? Hello. My name is Sari. I'm a designer. And yeah, so I was just going to talk a bit about how, as a visual designer, accessibility can influence how I do things. How many of you here are designers, if there are any? Oh, it's quite a lot of you. I wasn't expecting that. Good. All right. So if this question, if somebody come and ask you, can I have accessible website, please? And as a designer, what kind of like visual disadvantage that you think you need to be like thinking about? What's the first thing coming to your mind and what you really need to answer? Is there any?
Contrast. Font size.
Font size, contrast.
Color.
Colors.
The ability for the user to change any of those themselves.
Yeah. So kind of like HTML text rather than the picture. Right. So if I can figure out how this actually works, Yay, made it work. I never use Keynote, so sorry. So first thing is like the font size. That's to do with if you have, say, if you have visual impairment, so you can't see it very well. Got glasses to a certain point, so you can't. And also you have to think of like a aging population. So say I got a stat, say 11 million people are over 65 years old here in the UK, and more people are over 60 than under 18. So people are getting older, and then they're more tech savvy. So obviously they're using computers more. So I think we need to think about somebody with the glasses on there, and also somebody mentioned color. Not sure if everybody can see this. It's fuzzy. Even if you can see it, it's quite hard to see. But if you can see it, can you see it? What can you see? Thank you. So this is typical color blindness test called the Ishihara test. And if you have a color blindness, which is like red and green area, what you would see is this. So I've used a Photoshop filter to do this, so you can test it really easily. So even if you think there's a clear distinction, for some people there isn't. And blindness, which is also an interesting thing, subject for a designer. You think that it's a visual design, so if you can't see it, it doesn't really matter. But I think there's a lot that we can actually help to make the situation better. And another one nobody mentioned is dyslexia. So it's about 10% of the UK population actually have a dyslexia of some sort, and 4% of people are severely so. And it's quite uniquely English problem actually, because the English language is what you see on the what it's spelling is not what you're pronouncing most of the time. So if you have a more phonetically kind of aligned language, there's less people show the sign, symptom of dyslexia, but it's quite easy to spot the people with that particular characteristic in English. So yes, so it's worth considering. And slightly, it may not be the disability, but again, following what Joe mentioned, people have loads of different devices, and they all got all the different sizes. So in that sense, if you've got slightly obscure devices that nobody checks, it's a kind of disability, because nobody cares about what you see. So it's good to think about responsiveness. Right. So a few things to remember. So I'm just going to do practical tips of the areas to look at. I said a few things. There's actually 7. So I should have said several. The first point is a good typography is semantic and responsive. So what I mean by that is I've shown the same slides in different ways earlier. So this is dictionary definition of the word semantics, but I just took off all the stylings. So it's one style. If this is in the middle of the page of your big dictionary, there's no chance you're going to find the word semantics. You can't scan it. You don't know where the line breaks is, what the informations are. So it's losing it like typographic treatment. Suddenly you're a bit lost, that you don't know where you are. And this is what typical dictionary will do. You got bold letter, semantics, slightly hanging out, so it's really easy to spot when you're scanning the page. And all this different type of information has different stylings, so you can tell, right, so these are related to the word semantics, but they all have slightly different meanings. So by looking at the typographic treatment, when you really have to think about the relationship between each piece of information. And that's what the semantic web really looking at. So this connection between different elements. So you're identifying these things while you're doing the typography. And if you do the typography correctly, you can do a little bit different things and it still works. So I've added the line breaks. Obviously, it's not very pretty, but you can still tell the piece of information. It's probably clearer because you've got now the line break is not just the starting of the type, but the line break is differentiating the information. And once you got that thing sorted, you can change the width, you can change the the direction, you can change the direction, you can change the length of things, you can change the location of things even. As long as you get this relationship between each text correct, you can move things about and it still stays true. So when you particularly thinking about like a responsive web design, as Joe said, think about mobile first, and you're forced to think about your hierarchy of information. So what's first, what's second, which word is related to what, and you really get that right at the typography level, it will work anywhere, whatever you do with it. Oh, hang on a minute. Maybe I should go back just to mention that by doing so, it helps your text reader. That was a point, and I just missed it. And if you have a correct order of things, if you're, when you presented it, the text reader will go through it in a correct order. Right. And the next point in the typography should be large and nice and spacious. So that's go down to the slightly, the difficult to see. So I wouldn't call it disabled, but the people with hard to see eyesight, and they would like the text to be larger, and also the older generation, they probably want it to be larger. I'm getting to that stage, and you want to be spacious as well, so you can identify which, what I'm looking at clearly without having a clutter, and that this really helps the dyslexia. So if somebody has a dyslexia, what they don't want is a noise around the text, because they find it really hard to concentrate. Everything else distracts. So it's nice to have a large, simple text and then not much distraction around it. So that would help the and dyslexic people. And next one is again typography, but be really picky with fonts. So when you choose a font, not just thinking about the styling, how it looks, but also how the characteristics of the fonts, whether that suits your particular audience. So it really affects dyslexia again. So when if you've got a font with clear descender, this bit, and ascender top bit, that identifies the character well, and also when you have a similar character, the mirroring character, it should have a different look rather than completely mirroring. So this is very confusing for the dyslexic audience. That's easier for them to identify. They're different. So that's kind of three points about typography. And then now I'm going to mention about color. And I'm just going to give you a quote that I actually heard somebody say at the review. It was a developer. So he said, so as I'm a colorblind, I can't actually see the status, but the green one means complete. So he had a traffic light system he was demoing, and he had this application in certain states. And some of them are complete, some of them are on the fly, but he couldn't tell which one is which because what he had was a circle with color, and he couldn't tell which one is which. So just to demonstrate how it's like. So this is famous traffic light system shown from the view of red and green colorblind view. And we all know that's green and not red and yellow, probably, if you've seen any food packaging. And I've just, I made all the grammage the same. So can you tell what are they? Can you tell the difference? Do you know how many colors is here? Is it 2 or is it 3? 3. You know there's 3. Can you tell which one is a different color? So that's very different. Yeah, so that's If you got a normal vision, that's what you see. So these ones got really close. You can't quite tell. And now you can see the color. You still have a problem because if you know what the color means, that's fine. But if somebody comes in who's never seen this system before, green means go. What is that to do with food? Red means stop. Should I stop eating this because it's got red on it? You don't know what that actually means until you actually get the point. So it's important to have color with context or the labels so that you can reinforce the fact that some items are high, some items are low using the color, but you should also say so, or you should also give other information that to differentiate each of them. So the point is information should not be communicated by color alone. So the same situation that developer should have said, well, if I can't tell the status, maybe we should be doing something a little bit more than the color. So along that line, blue is not a link. So it should have something else. If you want to say it's a link, it should have arrows, it should have icons, underline, whatever, button. But the color on its own shouldn't communicate that is a link, because you may not see it, you may not know it. Contrast, somebody mentioned contrast. Yes, I'm coming into the, yes, I'm coming into the color. This is quite mechanical, actually. It's mathematical. So it's in if you're trying to pass the accessibility stage, like AA or AAA, you need to make sure that this passes. So there's a website somewhere where Joe was showing. They've got a tool, so you can put the foreground color, background color, make sure that you get this AN and AAA level. You want to pass, you don't want to fail. This orange is, I started off using that orange for my presentation and I made it dark because it was fading. I think the contrast ratio needs to be 3. That was fading. It's just going back to my experience of it, orange actually is a very hard color to make it work contrast-wise, because when you use the color, make it as dark as possible, but you still think it's orange, it's not dark enough to have a white small white text on it. And the other end is true, so it's like light as possible orange is not light enough to have a black text on it. And the same thing applies to green, which is quite hard. And blue is really easy. That's probably why that's chosen as the link color. The trick to overcome that, if you have to work with orange or green, is what print designer would do, which is pick a color which is slightly darker than your brand color. So when they create the print design, they have a large shade of brand color, and if you have to have a text right next to it in the same color, they usually make it a little bit darker, because if you use the same color, it just visually illusion, but it looks lighter because it's a bit thinner. So you do the same. You can do the same thing. Pick your text, use a little bit darker color, and so that your text passes these tests. And I recommend you do it first when you actually starting a project. When you're creating a color palette, do this first, because if you're trying to change it later, it's really, really hard. You tweak one color and you might have to tweak all sets of them. So you start really early, and it's quite fun. You can just tweak a little bit, and then the construct ratio go up, and it's actually addictive. Right. And number 6, give a bit of color to your background. So dyslexic people, again, they actually don't like the contrast to be too strong. If it's too bright, it get a bit harder to read. So, and also kind of having a little bit of color probably nice to add a little bit of character to your design anyway. So consider adding a splash of color on the background to make it a little bit easier for the dyslexic audience to read. And the last point, am I going quite quickly? Okay. Consider the printing. So these two pictures are the print screen from two newspaper sites about the Hutton Garden. And obviously the Guardian thought about it when they do the print screen, because the website doesn't look like this. They made it so optimized for your reading experience, so make sure that all the text are there and you can read it. Independent, on the other hand, didn't really think about it, so you just literally print the page. Dyslexic audience prefer to read things on the paper quite often, so it is good to consider. It's not a massive job. It's quite little nice to have, but it's really worthwhile to think, why people are printing it, especially long contents. Have a little bit of time spent on working out how the print screen will work. So that's a very quick rundown of 7 tips if you want to do any, if you want to make your design accessible. So you have just remember that the semantic typography is semantic, and its good typography is semantic. And then use large and spacious, kind of think large and spacious. And I forgot to mention about the fold, but I have a thing. I don't know if everybody agrees, but I personally think fold is still overrated, because you can't tell where the fold is going to be. The different devices, you can't control it. So just think more about typography, hierarchy of information. What if it's that important? Maybe it should be the first article to go. So just really drastic about the order of things. I'm aware that this kind of bit hard if you're doing templates kind of thing, so you don't know what the content's going to be. It's probably easier if you're doing like agile project with a content first approach, so you already got your real content before you start designing. But something to think about. And a third one, choose your fonts like you really mean it. So that font's not just look and feel, but also the actual functionality of it. And the fourth one is this is very important. The information or functionality should not be communicated by color alone. And fifth, mind the contrast. Make sure you go to the tool and check it. 6, consider having a little bit of background. Nice splash of little bit color, nice and helpful. And 7, just have a plan for printing. And by doing so, as again, as Joe mentioned at the end, I don't think this means you're bringing your design down or anything, but you're actually making it better by giving a clear structure, lots of lovely space, and readable fonts. Whoa. What was that? And nice website which communicates what it needs to do. That's about it. And the resources, British Dyslexia Association website is really helpful if you want to know a little bit more about it. They've got lots of nice info sheets that you can follow. And the Photoshop in Illustrator has a colorproof section which has 2 filters. And this is green and red ratio of area of the color blindness filter, which I use to create some of the visuals that I've shown you earlier. And Chrome extension, there's one called Spectrum that I quite like, and there's another one called C, and I'll just see if I can show you. So I've got the Spectrum there. So it's put on most of the website. If you go, so you can see the different type of color blindness kind of simulated on there. So that's quite useful. C is a bit more comprehensive. You can actually change the degree of, what's the level of color blindness. Or they got a little bit different things like cataract, which is it's quite interesting how they go blurred. So these are, pardon? Yeah, it is Chrome. Yeah, Chrome. Yes, that's the one. Yeah. So these could be useful. Oh, where did it go? There you go. And the color contrast is the tool I was using is on the web AIM site. That is useful, but I think there are other ones that you can use as well. So that's recommended. Right, thanks. 20 minutes. I was trying it. It was taking half an hour, so it's good that I finished quicker. Any questions? What was it? Right. What?
So
you're not supposed to ask questions. Go on then.
Are serif fonts then considered more accessible than something?
Not necessarily. I think but having for the dyslexic audience, having exaggerated letters helps. So if you got a D and where the D go bold, get really fat, it's easier to identify the characters. But I think it depends how they're designed. No, like in curly fonts, probably not. Yes.
Is this sort of something that you apply to every project that you do, or do you sort of have to convince clients about this, or is this something that they jump on more closely?
So in terms of color contrast things, I just do it without telling them when we do the.
But generally, sort of the accessibility and.
Yeah, I think clients a bit more wary of it, but I think people's perception is accessibility is where the coding happens. Yeah. That's the bits that they need to worry about. So I don't get too much question about them. I just tend to do it. And in terms of responsive site, it kind of naturally accessible, and it becomes a lot more accessible. So yeah, I tend to do it. And if clients question something and I say, well, because it's more accessible, they usually back down and say, oh, yeah, okay, then that's fine. Fortnum and Mason is a quite interesting one because they're kind of turquoisey color is not, the particular actual brand color is too light to be used in anywhere online. So we had to make it darker. So that was they're happy for me to do so. Yeah. Anything? Yes.
When you look at blindness and you start using the tools in Google, which are really good, how do you then go away and use that in your process? So do you actually use that in the process?
Yeah. So
because the cataract one kind of like it made
cataract is yeah.
How would you then go away and say, okay, how do we fix it?
Yeah. So catalog's quite hard because suddenly it very quickly becomes very hard to see. Probably more I check on the more bothered about the color blindness side of it and the contrast. So when I created a flats, I tend to drop it on the browser to check it, just to see whether things are clear enough. I had to select a color for a graph pie charts, and it will have a maximum of 10 colors, which is quite hard to choose. The 10 colors all different, all look different in with all the different sort of color blindness. Because I think you tend to choose the color from the same sort of darkness, which would merge into one if you can't see certain colors. So it's quite important, if you, especially when you're doing things like that, it's important to check whether they're separate properly.
Do you find that works different on different devices and browsers, or is it cross browser?
I think it will be different. I haven't gone that far yet. That's quite extensive, but I probably just check on Chrome. And I should probably talk to that developer and say, can you see it? Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find some of these color differences are sort of mitigated by people using older screens where there's less color range? So it's harder to cater for people.
Yes and no, probably. So you can do a little bit more when you can. So you mean that, like, sorry if I understood it correctly. So if not all the screen that can say only show 256 colors.
Or just not the full multiple bounds set values.
Right.
The same.
Yeah. Well, I think in my point of view, the design should be how you want to design it, how you want everybody else to see it. You should think about your wide audience, but not dropping the small audience, rather than bringing everything for the small audience, if that makes sense. So because that's you can do it. You can achieve the same. You can achieve this. You can cater for them without starting from them, in a sense. Fairly easily these days. So if you just need to start thinking about them at the beginning, rather than trying to shoehorn in at the end. So as long as that's in your mind from the beginning, I think it doesn't need to be. It's actually quite good having lots of different color range, because you can make it look like a little bit of you can use optical illusion. Make it look things darker when actually it might not be, or that way around. So there's a little bit more trick that you can use to make it work for everybody, without compromising your design, if that makes sense. Any more? Yes.
Outside of the extensions that you're using to test with, are you able to test with anyone from the visually impaired community as well?
Well, I used to work with the developer who have a quite severe red and green color blindness, but beyond that, I don't really have access to these people, and I'm sure they're around. I know there's at least one who said that quotes earlier is nearby, but no, I think that's something I'd like to do. Yeah, in the process, definitely. Yes.
Just wanted to ask, a lot of what you were talking about is when you're designing it yourself and the things that you want to put on the page and how you want it to look. You didn't really touch on situations where people are, for example, using an accessible browser, or a browser that bypasses your style sheets, or, for example, some of the other design things you can do, for example, dyslexia organisations will often have a button where you can change it to a high contrast yellow or black. Yeah. Actually, within the template. Yeah. I know some of the things that you were talking about there are good for when someone switches off your design. Do you think from that perspective?
Yeah, like Firefox, it has like things you can switch on to make it suitable for you. So.
Your Actions website, they've got a thing in the top left-hand corner that will change.
Yeah.
At the front was saying, change the size of the text without you doing anything.
Yeah. So that has been, I think it became a bit of trendy thing to do a few years back, and then now kind of disappeared, which is a bit strange. But I guess it's more. It became a little bit built-in things on the browser to control that kind of thing. And I think, yeah, I agree. There's definitely need to think about. But I think I'm probably geared more towards the design. Why you envisaged work from point of view, and how you can improve that to make it better for you make it more accessible. Yeah, but I think it's just the approach is that if you make it more, and if you get your typography right, it will be easier for the dev to understand what the semantic of the, what the structure is, and live text can't be a bad thing. So yeah, sorry, I agree. That's definitely something to look at. I didn't really go over. Done? Right, Dominic.
Right. Okay. So I'm Dominic. I'm a user interface developer at Red Badger. I'm not James Hopkins. So James Hopkins is actually ill, and well, the show must go on basically. So I'm just gonna do it. How many of you are developers? Cool. And when you do a project, on your project, is accessibility always a requirement, or can you put your hands up if it is? Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk a bit about developer mindset when doing accessibility, and we're going to start with a bit of Twitter wisdom. So there's more users with disabilities than people using IE8. Still, we tend to drop accessibility in favor of IE8 support. So IE8 is Internet Explorer 8, if for any reason you don't know. and this is really, really sad. And it's actually not true as well, because accessibility is even more often an afterthought. So people don't think about it at all, and especially developers for various reasons. Mainly because we're lazy, but yeah. So, but okay, let's say you start taking this seriously as a developer, and you start thinking about, okay, what is web accessibility? So you go to Wikipedia and okay, web accessibility, the inclusive practice of removing barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites by people with disabilities. But there's one thing wrong with this, and it is that it implies a level of retrospect. And when you do a project, when you kind of want to bolt in something late in a project, there's always problems. Your project manager is going to say, well, but we have to support IE8 and you didn't solve those bugs or whatever. So it's always harder. So why don't we say the practice of ensuring everyone can use websites? Because that's what accessibility actually is. It's not making people with disabilities, not allowing them to use website, it's allowing all the people to use websites. Because if you're not doing something, you're actually excluding people, not the other way around. So we already heard like about who is actually affected the most. So people with visual impairments, people with motor mobility issues, users with hearing impairments, you, me, everyone else. So why make the web accessible to everyone? That we already said, empathy is a very good start. But if you're going to talk to someone, you can say that's a basic human right. In the UK, Disability Equality Act, you can call yourself on that. And increase your audience if you're talking to your marketeers. Good point. And as well as a developer, making your code better, be more accessible, is actually making you a better developer, because you're actually thinking of how it will be consumed by more than just the browser. And why would you intentionally prevent a certain demographic from using your site? So what are we using as developers to improve accessibility on the web? We use something called semantics. And take a second to take this in. I'm going to read it for the video. So if I have 12 tomatoes and take away 2, what is the difference? Exactly, I don't like tomatoes either. What are you in this then? Semantics. So this shouldn't look scary, and you don't need to care about it. What you need to know about this is when you reach a website, the consumer, which could be a browser, a screen reader, or search engine, chops up your website into many parts, and among them is the DOM. And the DOM is basically a semantic bubble wrap over your content. And as well, it changes over time. So before, HTML, so basically the DOM, was pretty crap about accessibility and providing semantic tools. You couldn't really do much. But these days, we have this fantastic buzzword, HTML5, and HTML5 is actually pretty good about semantics. We have tags that can imply which part of the page is the header, which is the main part, which is the related part, and probably the most important, which is the navigation, which tells us about metadata. And as well, there's this thing called YARIA. And YARIA is Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. I have that written down because I never can remember it properly. And that's actually really cool, because what that is a spec letting you improve your DOM to describe how it changes over time. So you not only can like tag your content and split it into parts, but you can describe it in much more detail. And what this does is allows you to use your HTML or your DOM, however you approach it, not only by thinking about what the visual output of it, but also how other consumers, so screen readers, search engines, anything, will actually interpret it. So I'm gonna do a small demo in a minute of how that looks like, but I'm not gonna go deeply into it, because what it is at the base is very simple. It's literally a language that lets you do that. And how can you start changing your website to be more accessible? Well, the first thing is the navigation. So we're gonna do a little screen reading thing in a sec. So if that's gonna be our first for you, then it's gonna be fun. But the navigation is the most important thing. Basically ensuring that your website that you can navigate it by keyboard is the most important thing, and probably the most overlooked thing. As well, doing like custom interfaces, so widgets, and not thinking like, can they be accessed by keyboard or anything other than a mouse, or even sometimes just focusing on, for example, touch input. That's a real body. Really important also your document flow. So basically, it's easy to focus on how the document flows visually, but if you would try from the beginning, like with a screen reader, to jump to certain parts of the page, can you? You need semantics on your page to actually do that. So I encourage you to try out navigating any website just using the tab, shift tab, which goes back, and enter. In most cases, it's quite hard. So let's look at some examples, very small ones. Gonna go into Safari. So this is very simple tab component. Click here, just switches to tabs, and this is gonna feedback. Try to enable the
Accessible underline tabs HTML window prices selected tab 1 of 2.
So that's actually our screen reader. 1 second.
Application window D I X voiceover off.
Switch it off for a sec. And just where are the displays, so you can actually see here what it says, and hopefully it's not gonna focus on the window. And I'm using something called VoiceOver in a Mac, which is a built-in screen reader. And I'm gonna go with the tab key.
Prices selected tab 1 of 2. Features tab 2 of 2.
So I'm now navigating with the keyboard, and even if I wouldn't see the site, I would see where am I. So sorry for the feedback. That's probably the Google Hangout.
You are currently on a tab row inside of HTML content.
You can probably mute
muting.
Yeah. If I knew how. Accessibility issue. Yeah. Okay, never mind.
HTML content.
So now I'm going to just show quickly the. Oh, that's a nice echo. The navigation over a page. So this page is marked up like with the proper elements, and with VoiceOver, I can actually go through what is called landmarks, and I could jump to any proper section, and it's of course.
This is the first section, aside content, with aside content.
Reading out everything. And this could include links, headings, everywhere. So if you haven't tried it, I really encourage you to try it on one of the big sites like BBC, Daily Mail, and see how well they're doing. Most of them don't. So actually people can't read the Daily Mail. So maybe that's a good thing.
What about the BBC website? Because they have an accessibility team. They do it well.
Yeah, they have an accessibility team and guidelines, and they're described and you can access them. But From what I saw, it differs from page to page. Actually, maybe they're from different teams. I know there has been a big effort on the iPlayer team, but if you go on the BBC News website, it's I'm not gonna go here perhaps because it's like might be overflow, but really try it yourselves. It's well, I'm not gonna say how it is on such big projects. I think it's just ridiculous that because that's not done because it's just not that hard. So so yeah, that's it basically, and some don't and do. Sorry, I didn't think. Treat accessibility as an implementation. Don't treat accessibility as an implementation afterthought. The mantra is development is part of accessibility, not the other way around. Do treat accessibility as an implicit project requirement. Incorporate new exit criteria into user stories to ensure that no user story can progress past development without the relevant conformance. So, thank you. Any questions?
Do we know how many assistive technologies can are?
So
it seems to be very much a new sort of attitude in coding, but I've also read that a lot of screen readers are not set up to understand it, and also that a lot of people who use screen readers don't replace them very often because they're quite expensive.
yes, they are. So it's quite good that Mac has built in one. I'm not sure if Windows has one. I think there is some free ones, but the thing with the standards is some of these screen readers are older than those standards, and also try to do more than the standards allow. I've mentioned briefly that HTML wasn't always that good, or there wasn't these standards that help that. This is literally the work of recent years, but people who cared about disabled people or providing accessible devices earlier, they had to rely on other things when these standards weren't there. So I think they just continue with that. So there's certain incompatibilities.
Just to kind of follow on from that, it's always changing, isn't it, in the terms of the coding, the practices of coding. There was this time when developers would make a visual design using tables. That isn't done anymore.
Yes,
so there's a clear separation of a visual representation and the semantic structure of the document, which then can inform the assistive technology and help with the overall navigation. So expert screen readers.
Yes, because now the screen readers have to handle actually apps that are in the browser, and before they had to handle web pages, and that's a massive jump. And I think in some cases it's just for some applications it's just a transition period, or even for the spec, because the spec is also the Y area is also changing and in flux, and as well HTML. Even getting a main element HTML took years for people to agree should it be there or not. Not to mention actually implementing it in the browsers and things like that. But that's literally detail. The important bit is we as developers don't really do enough. Don't think about that enough, and we should and we can.
Another kind of interesting point is that the semantic structure kind of there's a connection, isn't there, between usability and accessibility. So if something is accessible, it becomes more usable for the users, but also for other tools that kind of plug into and can search through any of your web pages. So if you've got an accessible page, it's more like it's more Googleable. which is subsequently incredibly helpful for any business.
Yes, yes.
If something is accessible and is more Google, then that can be more money, irrespective of.
Yeah, that's actually really funny. I think like Sari Stark pointed out like lots of things, like even spacing. Like, okay, maybe we do it for people who have perhaps find it harder to focus, like with, I don't know, HDAD or whatever. And if we actually and you could consider that a disability, like I'm talking about to some extent, because basically I have the attention span of a five-year-old, so I appreciate if there's some space between things, if I can find it. So that's basically usability. But if you approach someone that has that to some like magical extent that it's really hard to focus, there's like this thin red line, basically, where you go from usability to accessibility. But that's just like, we just imagine this. It's all usability. It's all usability, and it's all, we're all people, all have blood flowing through our veins and things like that.
Could you just say something else I was kind of taught or read in that? I've heard that in some instances there was a bit of an objection to accessibility in the sense that it can restrict my creativity. But a counter argument to that is if you code using the standards, then that actually enables you to do even more. So, and everybody's getting electricity from the mains through a 3-pin plug. And if every plug was a lot different, if every design, if that was a lot different, then it's hard to actually do anything. So
yeah, but that's how it basically is. Like if you go to Europe, you can't use your UK plug.
Well, that's different.
It basically.
The analogy kind of collapses.
I mean, I think like people who say like, oh, accessibility is influencing my creativity, that's bollocks. Because you're supposed to, if you're building a product, you're supposed to think of your users and not about your creativity. Then think about like, restrictions also influence your creativity. And if you want to like really express yourself, maybe you shouldn't use products. You should do art or something. I don't know. That's
I'm probably slightly different from some of the here. I'm a content owner rather than code or anything like that. And I think the thing that I try to convey more than anything else is it's fine to have a nice design and it's fine to have clever code, etc. But it's the content that the people are trying to get access to. And we tend to forget this.
Yes.
And without having the information that you're supplying, it doesn't matter how sophisticated the site is, it won't achieve its goal. And that's something that I try to convey at all times.
Yeah, so I think Gov UK, they were writing about this as well, that they have a large team of actually people who content makers, and they always write as if their audience is about 12 years old, sorry, just to make it more accessible. So not to like vary the language too much, to make like the base label for that, and that's I think I don't remember which. Yeah.
There's actually some really good links to writing for people that anyone can understand within that book.
Yeah.
There's some fantastic links. It was within actually the first presentation.
Yeah.
So that's what I found.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's.
It's kind of like it's about writing for plain English.
Yeah.
You kind of get into that mindset when you're thinking about content on the web, and there are some really good recommendations within that book.
And treating content as a user interface, which is, I think, like really awesome. So, cool. Thank you.
context on. So like stepping in last minute to cover James, that literally was like this morning that you confirmed that you would cover that. So yeah, like I said, there's loads of booze left to be drunk. So please dig in, and there's still pizza left as well. There is a microwave. And we'll put some like music on and stuff. But yeah, just like make yourselves at home. Like, thanks for coming.